Good morning, everyone. A warm welcome, everyone, to the day 1 session of refresher course on DISA 80 course. I welcome today's speaker, Paul Jayakar, sir, CA Changalreddy, sir, our ex-official member, and I also recognize the presence of CA Pandukumar Gar, Tirupati chairman. Here, I welcome CA Pandukumar Gar to give his opening remarks on today's session. Over to you, sir.
Good morning, all members. Today, there is a topic on protection of information address. And today's speaker is Dr. C.A. Paul Jayakar, sir. And on behalf of Tirupati branch, we are expressing very thankful to our Guntur branch chairman, Jonalagadda Srinivasa Rao Garu, C.A. Maddi Raviteja Garu, secretary of the Guntur branch, and all committee members of Guntur branch. Actually, I am also a 80 student. I am going to write 80 exam coming this attempt. This course is really wonderful and very excellent. We got all simple techniques, whatever we have generally we have got from like Mumbai, Chennai. So this program is very excellent. I think this will more useful for me also. That's why, since I am a 80 student, so I enjoy like anything. I think everybody enjoy like this course, very fruitful. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Because today the topic is very important, and I don't want to waste much more time. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Now I request our speaker of the today's session, CA Paul Jayakar, sir, to hand over the session. Sir, over to the speaker, sir.
Thank each one of you. And today what I'm doing is I'm changing the way we are doing it a little differently.
Sir, can you adjust your face, sir?
Actually, what I thought is, sir, I'll if I can.
No, your face is not visible.
Okay, no problem. There's a problem, sir. I'll actually switch off my camera so they can see the full screen now. I'll just run through the whole screen.
No
is that
issue,
okay?
No.
Is that okay? Can I?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Switch off the camera. Okay. Right now, what you see on your screen, what I'm going to do today is I'll quickly run through the module. I'm not running through a study material because anyway, it's already in your possession. I'll just go through the index, which I have cut and pasted in the slides, so that I can quickly explain, and then we'll spend time with the questions. And just a small disclaimer before we start. See, most of these questions we normally use are the retired questions. Retired means they've been the older portion. They probably don't want them anymore because they got new questions which are there in the question bank. The other thing is, will the core knowledge change? It won't change. It will be constant. So using the retired questions is safe. But only thing you have to do is just read the material so that you just update yourself. Sometimes the options may differ. What happens because I see some of your questions here. I see there's could be a possible change in the options. The other possibility is that there is a new topic which is added, which has to be probably upgraded into the question. So there's not much, maybe I would safely say less than 20%, so 80% will be same. But since your pass mark is 75%, don't take a chance. Try to read the material at least 2-3 times. Just read it. I mean, don't bother whether you understand it or not. Just read it so it becomes familiar. Then when you see the questions, automatically the familiarity will be there and your mind will quickly recognize the answer. If it is new, then what happens is the mind wastes a lot of time thinking, and then in the exam hall, you're losing precious time. One more thing is, when you're answering the question, since we don't have negative marking, you answer all the questions you know first. Then come back to the ones which are a little doubtful or you don't know at all. It doesn't matter. Just come to those. First, you finish all the questions you know. very confident, complete them. Then come back to the ones you are not so confident. Well, if you can guess the answer, guess it. Otherwise, you tick something. There's no negative marks, so you will not lose any marks. But if it is correct, by chance, if it is correct, you will get a mark. Now, if you don't answer and leave it, then you'll get a 0. So, I know there are a lot of borderline cases, so don't leave questions unanswered. Answer the correct ones. I mean, ones which you know you answer correctly. The others, don't leave them. Answer something. At least just guess something and use your intuition. Don't leave a question blank. So I think that should be enough for the exam part of it. What I'll do is, I told you, there are only a few things which I really have to explain from the earlier portion to the newer portion. One is, we need to understand why do we need these security objectives. Actually, the word information has become very vast. It's like cyber, you know. So meaning is not just internet, it's gone beyond that. So information is not just data. It is the entire hardware, software, applications, the networks, including data. So I'm not excluding data, but this is not specifically data. So that's one thing you have to keep in mind. As I go ahead, I'll explain this. So security is for the entire computing environment. So think of it as computer security objectives, but officially it is called information security objectives. The second part is, we have some models here. Now these models are, they come to us from different people, open source people, manufacturers, and so on. Now, why do we have to study models? Of course, you are familiar with the certain, they provide a lot of data. There are a lot of people who provide data. Now this OWASP or OWASP is mainly for web-based, not just web pages, but web-based applications. So what they do is, they publish the top 10 vulnerabilities on a regular basis. They also tell you how the vulnerability or the exploit takes place, so that as an auditor or as a consultant, you will be able to advise your clients how best to protect themselves. So you'd have seen things like cross-site scripting, buffer overflows, stack overflows. We'll go into those details. So this one is for the web pages, web applications. The DREAD model was actually developed by Microsoft. All the expansions are there in your material. It's for damage, reproducibility, and exploitability, etc., affected users, and so on. This expansion is there. But what I want you to understand is, these are models which Microsoft doesn't use anymore, but OpenStack and other people are using it. Now, this is again a model where you identify vulnerabilities, and if they fall into this damage, reproducibility, etc., exploitability, and so on, then they need to be addressed. So it is something like a door with no lock, or a tap which is leaking. You know, those are the kind of things you do here. The STRIDE model is slightly different. Again, this is for spoofing, tampering, repudiation, and so on. Now, this again is almost the same thing. Now, is it only 3 models? No, there are plenty of models. In fact, the dispute is always on how many models to include. It depends on what the auditor wants to do. At least for the exam, we are aware of one thing: there are models. What are models? So we have actually used the word framework and model little interchangeably. You probably saw some frameworks already, like COBIT or COCO model, the Canadian information model, or the COSO model for your risk management in from the RCM point of view. There is a ITAF, Information Technology Assurance Framework. Okay, there are ever so many models for audit. Now, this is for security. It's not threat modeling, it's actually security modeling, where we are dealing with threats. What is the security we are worried about? It's the threats. The next is, I told you this word cyber is, I mean, just substitute the word internet for this. Officially, it's still called cyber, but you can put the word internet mentally, so that wherever you see cyber terrorism, cyber warfare, cyber attacks, cyber security, just think of it as internet, or remove the word inter also, just call it network. So these are network. Computer, of course, we understand the machines and the software and storage and so on. So these are attacks both on the machines, which we call hosts, and attacks on the connectivity of these hosts. The connectivity is the cyber. Just use the word cyber, but mentally substitute the word network or internet. Now, when you go to the information system, I already told you this is computer systems. Wherever you see this information systems, IES, you just think of it as a computer environment. Now, we have a lot of these. Okay, we know why we need them because of hackers and thieves. The objective is, of course, to prevent them. Now comes the internal controls and the type of controls which we'll have to go into detail. Now, internal controls, we are familiar with the financial controls, but I mean, all controls are internal controls only. These controls have to be kind of, the objective has to be generated, or we call it the governance, has to be generated by the owners or the directors or whoever is in ownership of the company right now, management. Then the rest of it is they have to be implemented, you have to test them, effectiveness, etc. And types of controls, of course, is whether you're detecting something after it has happened. It's called a detective control. You have preventive control. You can stop it before it happens. Or you have corrective controls, which means that it will find the defect and set it right and continue. There's one more called directive controls. I didn't see it in this module, but it may be in your risk management module, which is your audit module. Directive control is more like governance. It's more like instructions. So by putting in a set of instructions, you're avoiding the problem itself. Just go through these things. Then we come to the risk and control ownership. Who owns the controller? Who owns the risk? Each process owner, as we call them, process owner means nothing. Suppose a storekeeper is there, a pilferage takes place. He is responsible. So you can think of ownership as responsibility. Now, will he undertake the responsibility? Well, if there's nothing else available, he's the owner, the storekeeper. The risk is pilferage. Control is maybe he has barcoding, he has got some day-end procedures, something would be there. But what happens if in the same stores, the storekeeper is not responsible for security, but they've appointed guards, I mean security guards. Then the ownership of the risk changes. Security guards take over the risk and control. The storekeeper is only doing the processing part, the operational part, issues and receipts and so on. So it depends now. So when you look at the ownership, just apply a simple question, just apply a simple rule. If something goes wrong, will that person be responsible? If the answer is yes, then that person is the owner of the risk. And obviously he has to own the control also. You can't put the risk to one person and give the control to some other person. You can't say security guards will take care of security, but if anything is lost, storekeeper will be arrested. No, that won't make sense. So whoever is going to be responsible, then he has to take the ownership. What about computers? It's a little more difficult because we have owners of data. We have database administrators. A lot of people administrate things. We have network administrators. You have this cloud, means outside your premises, you have got processing going on. So sometimes it's a little difficult to define ownership. It's not impossible, but it may look like, see, you are given the data to an outsourced company and some theft took place in the outsourced company because you read regularly credit card numbers got stolen from where, not from your laptop or your phone. It got stolen from some place where you use the card. Like for instance, for instance, where you lost the money, used the card to buy something online. You trusted that online seller, like say Amazon or someone, but they're not supposed to store your information. That should have gone to the payment gateway. But let's say for some reason they did store it, hackers stole it from there. Though it is not, it is your data and you're the owner of the data. Amazon will be called the custodian of the data. So they have certain responsibilities where they have to, I mean, if something is lost, they are responsible. I cannot come and blame the person saying, why did you give your credit card to Amazon? If Amazon said we have privacy, we have security, then they are responsible. One of the questions asked is, what is the difference between responsibility and accountability? See, what happens is they are the same actually. Responsibility and accountability is the same, but responsibility and what we call it's not responsibility, it's the authority and the ownership which will differ. See, authority is required if you're asking someone to take care of the responsibility. You can't give responsibility without authority. So let's say same example, we got the storekeeper and he has to put in some safety precaution. Let us say high value items he wants to shift it to a secure location. He needs the authority to do that. If he doesn't have the authority, but he's only responsible for theft, then it's difficult. I'm giving a simple example. But think in terms of the same example I gave you, credit card numbers, which are retained by a merchant. Merchant is this person selling you the product. Payment gateway is the bank or credit card company. The merchant is storing it for some reason. I mean, he's got his own logical reason for storing it. He has disclosed it to the person also, the customer. Customer said, okay, he clicked on agree. Now we expect him to either encrypt and store it or change it and store it or jumble up something and store it. So even if it is stolen, it's useless. Now, does he have the authority to do that? Well, he needs the authority. Otherwise, if you tell him, no, you cannot encrypt my card number, then he'll keep it as a clear text, then somebody will steal it and it's a problem. Now, authority should be given by the owner of the data. This is something which, as you keep reading again and again, it will become clear to us. Now, authority is something which has to be agreed upon. Because in the computer world, what happens is, for instance, I'm taking the class. Now, let's say I taught you something wrong and you kind of took down the notes and then you went to the exam. You answered the question wrongly. Now, that's because I told you the wrong answer. Okay, so will I take the responsibility of the failure or are you responsible for the failure? It all depends how our liabilities were defined. So when we take classes for corporations or corporates, we normally put one thing called the safe harbor agreement, which says that whatever I've told you is that's it. And if you use that information and if you get into trouble, don't ask me. So something simple, I'm just making it simple. You go to the internet, you can read. It's called safe harbor. Now, what happens is if I don't put the slide now, maybe corporates we put it. If I have taught you something wrongly and the candidate has failed the exam, will I take the responsibility? I have to start by saying that I don't take the responsibility. So I don't know if you have seen any publication from our institute. It will say they are not responsible for what the publication contains. I don't know if you read it very carefully. Even your own study material will have a disclaimer. It says the views expressed, etc., not ours, and so on. So we are washing off the responsibility. We only are taking the authority and saying that, okay, this is the study material, but is it official? Yes, but if something goes wrong, will you stand by it? No. We have to define these in a lot of agreements. So most of them are online, so people just click and go away. They don't read it. But as a student, you'll have to understand this because right now auditors are not involved in this. But when they get into digital forensics, intellectual property, digital rights management, you'll have to understand this difference very clearly. Now, okay, I'll give you an example. See, today movies are always distributed in a scrambled manner. So what happens is you have scrambled it, but you're using the hard disk route. So your agent in that area, let us say Guntur area, goes to the theaters who have paid the distribution rights money, and he enables that, he unscrambles it using the password. It may be for 5 shows or 10 shows or 1 show, whatever. Now what happens is if this agent illegally took money and opened up, unscrambled something, who is responsible? Is it the theater owner? Is it the agent? Or is it the distributor? Or is it the company which produced it? That has to be clearly defined. So, of course, in the movie distribution rights, they are clearly defined. But take other things like books, songs, music. There's so many things today. Data is not always credit card numbers. There's a lot of data. Like, for instance, even if you took an online exam, your answers, your results should not be disclosed to outsiders. It should be disclosed only to the person who wrote the exam, unless you have agreed that this can be publicly displayed. Whereas in a normal exam, we don't care. We just put all the pass numbers on the notice board. So others can see who passed, who failed also. There's no agreement for that. But in online, there are plenty of agreements. Now, when we come to this monitoring, now this is the duty of the IS auditor. That's why we say, okay, we have the various auditors, internal auditor, external auditor, whatever. That's a statutory auditor. Then you have risk and control matrix and regular monitoring of these So there are actually we have to follow the COSO model for this. That's Committee of Sponsoring Organizations. Now, what you do is you set up a kind of a question where you first come out with a control objective. Why do you want this control? Now, for instance, we will say all products must, I mean, all dispatches must be backed by a pick list or a packing slip. Now, the question they can ask you is why? Then you know, if you don't have a pick list or a packing list, sometimes the orders are wrongly dispatched. The wrong items go out, short delivery, excess delivery, and so on. So the control objective is to ensure that all deliveries are as per the orders. No extra, no less, no wrong item. Now then we have to go to the potential risk. Okay, what is the risk if you deliver something wrongly? I mean, how risky is it? For instance, let's say in a shipping we're selling some furniture. Now what happens is you ship the legs of one cart and the rest of the parts from another cart. It won't assemble. So then the whole thing again becomes a return. There's a cost, there's a goodwill loss, reputation loss. And one customer may ask for refund, another customer may ask for replacement. So there are a lot of issues there. That's the risk, potential risk. Then comes the control. What is the control you're having? Is it barcoded? Is there a double check? I mean, like 4 eyes principle, etc. Then you'll come out with the impact. Like how serious is the problem? Suppose we keep on making mistakes, customers will not buy from us. So then it becomes a reputation risk. It can become a financial risk, a lot of risks. That is what we need to do. So every risk has to go for a control assessment. Then you talk to the people in the departments, the employees or whoever is there, and let them come out with their perception of the risk. Now, this is a carefully done exercise, must be done by the auditor very skillfully, what is called a control self-assessment or a CSA. So you have meetings with they call them stakeholders. Let's say, I gave you this dispatch example. The transport van driver is a stakeholder. The loading coolie is a stakeholder. I mean, not just the storekeeper. I mean, I'm talking about even the lower level people. Now we need to understand all their risks. For instance, we understand barcodes. Right up to the storekeeper, they understand. The loading coolie does not understand. So then how do we manage it? How do we help him? So in the control self-assessment, you'll find that the risks are being discussed freely, or they're supposed to be discussed freely. Then the auditor makes a note, then he understands the root cause of the problem, tries to find a solution, and so on. Then the IS auditor's role is not only in evaluating the controls, but he also has to suggest further controls, and risk can evolve. See, what looked like a great risk, because see, we make a big fuss about passwords. But today, most of the stuff, the passwords are gone now. They use biometric. Not just computers, even normal things, they use biometric. Even for luggage locks, many things they're using, because fingerprint reader is cheap now. So if you are struggling with passwords as a major risk, and suddenly you find passwords are completely disappearing, because even the cheap vehicles, maybe in a year or two, they'll have smart keys only. All the expensive vehicles already have smart keys. So what happens now is the risk of a forgotten password, changing password, aging password, difficult password, the whole story is gone. So risk has evolved, where you had 100 questions in the RCM about passwords, lost passwords, replacements, etc. That whole RCM has gone to waste because it doesn't exist anymore. You don't need it. Now, it's not just passwords. There are a lot of things which happen, like for instance, ATMs. 50% of the ATMs are closed today. So ATM risks have changed completely. It is now mobile phone risks and your net banking risks which have increased. So it goes on and on. So the IS auditor has to be very sure that his RCMs are updated. He's assessing the controls correctly. First, he has assessed the risk correctly, then the control correctly, and he has listened to all the stakeholders in understanding the risks and controls. There are ever so many cases, anyway, you don't need the case studies now. But just to give you some examples, see, when there's a peak load, sometimes they turn off security features. It has to happen, because otherwise you won't be able to handle the traffic. So at that point, the hackers get active. So how do you ensure that no control is switched off even if the load is high? but at the same time, you're not denying service to any of your customers. All those issues means it's basically like we have techno legal or techno medical. They call it med tech, fintech, reg tech, insure tech. Now we have audit tech also. So we have to be a little careful that we understand. If somebody comes and tells you we have encrypted the card numbers, then the question is, what encryption did you use? That is very important. Is it breakable? Is it not breakable? I mean, is it like unbreakable? So those are the questions which you'll have to get from people. Well, anyway, this control self-assessment is an ancient story. It's an old auditor's method where he talks direct to stakeholders and understands how they feel about the control and the risk and the control. Now, if you look at the security management itself, which we'll go ahead and look in detail, we got to have commitment from senior management. You will be calling this as tone at the top. Tone at the top means the management is committed to this, whatever controls you're putting in. Many of these scams in India, if you see, the tone at the top is not there. Okay, I'm not criticizing anyone, but if you look at most of the bank frauds, financial frauds, the tone at the top has to be the owners of the bank or the directors of the bank, no support. Simply they'll talk much later, but basically if you look at the fraud would have been committed by a manager and some collusion, something, sometimes with the head office collusion also. And then what you find is, since there's no commitment at the top, people down the line also start cheating. The auditor will find this very difficult because this is called management override of controls. So this is one of the biggest problems. So unless that management is committed, that's why you do a risk analysis before you pick up a client. If the management is not committed, then things are not going to work. Then what are the success factors for your security process or your security management? Success factors are a lot of success factors, mainly being training to the employees. Now, how important is this? Early days, not very critical because if he knows how to operate something, that was enough. But today you have a big problem called social engineering. Earlier it was people will phone, ask some details, get some unwanted information, then exploit it. But today they have blogs, people go and post it on Facebook. Now, people means unknowingly. Employees, sometimes even relatives of the employees, children, parents, they go post something on social media. They post it on public accessible locations. Then they also, you'll also find that when they click on links, which comes to you in your mail or your WhatsApp or whatever, they can start getting viruses and malware. Now, how do we teach them not to do it? So you get a greeting card, click here to see my wishes. I mean, the person is not really listening to your training, he clicks on it. That puts the virus into your into his phone. Then his phone is also part of bring your own devices because he's got his office mail on it. So the virus now gets into his office mail. From the office mail is connected to servers somewhere, so it goes there. From there, it enters into something else, a major crisis. So the success factors here are mostly people dependent. Technology dependent has become quite easy now because it's only programs and hardware and software. So we always think, firewalls or IDS or IPS or something. I mean, something like that will stop attacks. They will, definitely they will. But if your people are not going to follow strict rules, then the success factor will completely fail. This is something which is mentioned in detail in your study material. Please go through it. I'll explain it also. Okay, here we have the security organization. So how do we go about it? One is, don't let the same person do something and also authorize it. Actually, if you go to the official note on this, it will say the person who originates should not check it or validate it. That person should not, you need a different person who will actually authorize it. You need a different person who will account for it, post it in your system or whatever. Sometimes you can't get 4 people to do it. It's a small office, a remote location. I mean, it's not really, you don't have so many layers of stuff. So then you're forced to allow the person who created the document itself to validate it. then maybe the person who authorized it will also post it, or maybe he'll authorize and the first person will again post it. Two people may be there. Minimum we say two. Then are these duties connected in some way so they can pollute, cheat? For instance, he can authorize the returns of material. There are a lot of issues here, and see, for instance, in Flipkart, they had a major issue. Now they've plugged it. Most of them have plugged it, where they said that you can buy something and return it, and you can also buy something, you'll get a cashback. Unfortunately, there were two separate items. Buying and returning was operations, and buying and getting cashback was the marketing. That is a credit sales and marketing. What these people will do is buy it, get the cashback, and return the goods. Not just use and return, just return the goods. So you are getting cash back, which you could use for further purchases. So if you got enough cash back, you could start buying things free. So that was a big problem. So only at the somewhere at the quarterly audit or whatever, they found there were cashbacks and there were returns. Some smart auditor did match these two things, and then they found out this was a common fraud. Now, when we look at those kind of frauds, that's because if you have too much excessive segregation also, one person doesn't know what the other person is doing, there'll be a problem. Probably cashback should have waited for that 7-day return or 15-day return period. Once there was no return, then they should have credited the cashback. Do we have kind of dependent activities? We have to draw a flowchart for that to find out dependent activities. Then have we segregate? Suppose cashback and returns are handled by the same department. Let's say we decide, okay, let the same people do it. They can also cheat. So we have got all kinds of problems here. We'll keep it simple for the exam, but you'll have to understand it. If the exam question is a straight question, it's easy. If it's a scenario-based question, just blindly apply the rules. If one person does both, can he cheat? That's all you're asking. So if they can, then we need to separate the duties done by using a job description and so on. This is almost an extension of that, where we have authorization. Two people are required. They call it 4 eyes principle. That is, somebody creates something, maker, checker. That's the words they use. So one person does something, the other person endorses it, and then we feel there's no collusion. But again, check carefully. There could be collusion because in some cases you find employee loan is guaranteed by his colleague, and the colleague's employee loan is guaranteed by this first fellow. You'll have to be careful. Rotation of duties is to prevent somebody from staying there for so long. The easiest example is your Punjab National Bank SWIFT, where the person was never transferred for many years, more than 10 years or something. So he became very familiar and he knew how to bypass certain controls. So he keeps changing people frequently. Then key man policy is when you are depending on people who are key to the organization. Let's say they are your main research and development people or your main marketing strategists. You try to, the two things you have to do. One, you have to protect them. Second is you'll also have to make sure that they don't leave the organization. There has to be a retention policy. Now, sometimes this key man policy becomes very critical because if he leaves, for instance, you would have seen they kidnap the director of operations for a nuclear plant because he knows everything. So if they kidnap him, they can take away all the secrets of the organization. So it's like a spy story. But normally in companies, what happens is, even now there are cases between Zoho and Freshworks. They're saying key employees left and they took all the information with them. So they keep fighting all the time. This is something which the auditor has to warn the management. If he notices there's something wrong, too much dependence on a few people. Now we have to develop a lot of these policies, procedures, standards, guidelines. So those who are, I mean, this for the exam, this will do, but those who are going to use this in your practice or consulting, you can refer to the SANS site, SANS. It's a US government site where they give a lot of these templates for these policies and you can use them, you can fill it up and make use of it. So here what we find is the policies have to be developed. Now, should all of them have policies? Yes. Policies are a risk control measure. Now, if you don't follow the policy, then we are not following our risk controls properly. I have a policy. The policy says that all employees must have a background check. Full stop, that's over. Now, what is a background check? It again depends organization to organization. If you're going to use employees to, in your ATM, that not the ATM, where you carry the cash, like the area brings or CMS or whatever, the van comes and fills money in the ATMs. If you're going to use employees to take care of that van, then the procedure for background check will be very, very different. Whereas if you have a fellow supplying tea to the organization, tea or coffee, the procedure will be completely different. So a policy is blanket. It says background checks for all employees. But the level of the background check will have to be written down in procedures. What is it for certain high risk category? What is it for medium risk? What is it for low risk and so on. Then if there are any standards we need to follow, we'll implement them. Right now for background check, you don't have any standards, but for a lot of others, you have ISO standards, ANSI standards, there's a lot of standards available. And guidelines. Now, what is a guideline? Now, let's say we have asked for a degree referral. I mean, his qualification, we have to check. Many universities have gone in for this online now, so you can check it online itself, pay a small fee, just like a ROC, pay some money and you'll get details of the company and so on. But then we have to put that guideline down because this HR fellow may not know that it is possible to check online. So he will start writing letters to the university or he may start phoning the ROC. So we need, then the question is, will we have such dumb people? It is possible because a lot of these jobs will get outsourced. So we have to give them clear guidelines. Like if you don't get this much information, don't accept that information. It's incomplete. Because what happens is, today for vehicle registration and loan updates, there's a site called Vahan. I think it's Tamil Nadu based, I'm not sure, but there are mistakes in that site also. So what happens is, you're trying to give a loan for a vehicle, second-hand vehicle. You're not verifying the RC book visually, but you're checking it to the government online site. You have to give these guidelines, and maybe you realize that out of every 100 verification, 1 or 2 are wrong. Then that guideline is not sufficient. You may have to increase the guidelines. It becomes very complex. But if you work with these vehicle loan people, any organization, even hospitals, whatever, you'll find that the guidelines have to be very strict. So most of them will just go with the standards, hospital accreditation board standards, or there are a lot of standards. So if there are not too many standards, then you'll end up writing a lot of guidelines. So let's look at a policy, which is a high level statement. Procedure may differ in that same high level, it may differ for different categories. Standards and guidelines are somebody has already prescribed them to us. Guidelines, of course, we have to note them down and write it. If you extend this by one more, which you don't really need, it's called desk procedure, DESK procedure. That is a very detailed instruction to the employee what to do. Something like an audit checklist, very detailed. Like you check this voucher, see if the date is there, see if the amount is there, figures, etc. So it will be very detailed. Desk procedures also you'll have to check. But anyway, since the material doesn't have it, I'll also skip it, but you can make a note, desk procedure. That's the last one. Okay, then we have to see what are the components of this policy. Other common security policies. See, there are a lot of policies which are like mandatory, email policy, acceptable use policy, data retention policy. There are definite ones. But then there may be some lesser policies. Common security would be like, how do we handle third-party information if it is not sensitive? What I mean by sensitive is, it doesn't matter if it gets stolen, but still, you're not supposed to give it away. It can get stolen, it's harmless, but you're not supposed to be giving it away, but you have to hold on to it. So those other security policies are also standard policies. Then who has a control over policies? There's no question on this. This is the board of directors. See, they have to approve the policy. We say board approved policy. The board is the full board, not the audit committee. Board has the control over policies, and then somebody has to take responsibility for implementing it, converting it into controls, checking the controls. Of course, the auditor comes last. The company has to write the policy, prepare the controls, implement the controls, make sure they're working. Then the auditor will only come and certify or assure that the controls are working or not working, sufficient, insufficient. Are there any exceptions to the policies? These are very carefully to be noted. Certain things will be there. Like for instance, we have some algorithm export policies from the US. So certain encryption algorithms cannot be used because America does not allow export of algorithms, particularly if they deal with encryption. It goes under defense material. Now, let's say it's a BPO in India which is doing some work for an US company. They have put in their algorithms for encryption, which is US approved. This BPO as a covered entity or a service provider cannot use that encryption because they're in a different country. So country specific will apply. So exception here being country specific or algorithm specific. There can be other exceptions also, like people, like people specific. For instance, in India, if you employ a foreigner, you have to inform the Home Ministry, then you have to get clearances from the Immigration Department. So there are a lot of exceptions. So unfortunately, this becomes highly country specific. It is people specific. It is technology specific. We'll have to study them. Something like transfer pricing because it becomes that complex. Simple exceptions may be that, okay, executives need not, for instance, you put access control. High-level executives, you may not have access control. They can access everything. So that can be an exception. That's an easy exception, but more difficult ones are also there. Now, information classification is as per the IT Act. They have not mentioned that in this material, but in material 3, I think somewhere you'll find this Information Technology Act. Privacy Act is still pending. It's not passed. According to the IT Act, in the rules, you'll find there are some 8 categories of information which are personal and you have to protect. That is one part. The second part from the theory component is you have to classify your information as public, and classified means only certain people see it. Private means specific individuals. Confidential means only board level or maybe authorized by the board kind of people, and so on. So we have to make sure that our information is fully classified. I mean, it's all broken up into categories. And what are the benefits we get? Okay, we avoid legal action, punitive action. We avoid people suing us for stuff and so on. You need a policy that obviously everything needs a policy. Then this classification rules, that schema has to be developed. Now, see, this is one of the problems we all face because sometimes it's a little confusing. Your name may not be, you're given your Aadhaar number and your name. Your name may not be very, very highly secure. So, I mean, it's not a very important information. So probably that will go into maybe not public, but it may go into classified. But your Aadhaar number is definitely very safe, has to be kept very safe. So that may go in, not into classified, etc. That may go into confidential. So from the same record, what you call a record in a computer, data is given. Certain data will become highly protected and certain data may be less protected. We won't say unprotected, but we'll say less protected. So this is something where a classification has to be very clear. We take shelter under the IT Act, but it's not just the IT Act. We need to look at others also. When I say credit card numbers or something, they're all standard stuff which we find in the documents, regulated documents. But if you look at medical records, they call them EMR, electronic medical records. They have to be kept confidential. Hospitals cannot give out patients' data. It's not public. So there are a lot of things which may not be written anywhere, but of course the act is still yet to be passed. There's still a bill. It may not be written, but it will be coming soon. But we have to follow it. And somewhere in the material, you'll find 2 things given to you. One is the GDPR, the General Data Protection Rules from the European Union. UK has its own rules. And you'll find the Privacy Act from the US. So these 2 major acts, Europe and US, they have their own rules again as to what can be revealed and what cannot be revealed. So that's why we're spending so much time on this classification. Anyway, it's multiple choice, so you can't really choose, give a different answer. Out of those 4, you have to choose one. So just a little clarity on this will be helpful. Then we also talk about the responsibility. question asked was on this responsibility and accountability and authority and so on. One is the ownership. Ownership is who owns it. Like I have my driving license, I am the owner. If I lose it, I am responsible. But if I given this my driving license number to the policeman who caught me for not wearing a mask or a helmet or something, then he becomes a custodian. You're still the owner. I mean, you're still the owner of your driving license number, but then it is passed on to somebody. Now, this policeman cannot go around selling off driving license numbers to insurance company. Then he's in trouble. So custodians have certain liabilities, they are responsibilities. They have to, they're given the data for a specific purpose. They have to use it only for that purpose. Then controlling is, how is this flow of the information taken care of? What are the controls we have in place? And if there is a breach, how do we handle it? But generally you will find, actually students will find if you fail an exam, tutorial colleges will send you a letter. They're not supposed to know you fail. It's confidential information, but somewhere the custodian released it. Or let's say I told you this police thing, you'll get letters from the insurance company. That's also wrong because then somebody leaked out the information. So the controlling aspect was poor, very poor. Now, if that happens and the auditor is certified, you are familiar with the recent circular from the RBI, they've been asked to upgrade all their core banking systems, that if any clerk or any staff pull out account details and hand over to a customer, it should be logged and recorded. The case comes from a large public sector bank where the spouse of a divorcee went to the bank illegally and obtained the statements. When the case came up for hearing, the bank was pulled up and punished. So the bank was, now the RBI has given the circular. I mean, a lot of these circulars keep coming. There's a company law thing which says if you're a company and you got this accounting system, you must maintain an audit trail of all the transactions. So again, you have to follow it. So who is the owner of the data? Maybe the organization. Custodian is the accountant. Okay, there are lots of people in the accounts department. What is the control? Who can modify these logs? Who can meddle around with it? That becomes a problem. So of course, they won't ask a company law question, but in general, they may ask you without quoting the act. You also have human resource security, which is all their personal details, income details, their loans, and there's a lot of stuff in a HR file, experience, bad remark, good remarks. That also has to be kept securely. I told you training and education very important because we have to make sure they all pass their training exams. They're all aware of policies and they're also aware of the punishments if they don't follow a policy. Because many times the audit committee will ask, okay, if this doesn't happen, what's the punishment? Normally they say termination of the employee, so it goes up to that. Then we have the information implementation of these policies. That's one. One is the awareness part. Awareness is not for employees alone. It's for customers also. It is for everybody uses the system. Then how do we communicate, particularly when, okay, if everybody knows English, they read the policies, they're on the intranet, they're on the internet, etc. Good. But what happens if they're not literate? What happens if they're illiterate? Even vernacular language is easy. But if they're really illiterate, and then you got people are operating mobile bank accounts, maybe illiterate, like some watchman or servant or someone, how do we explain to them safety features, cyber security, controls? Don't give information. If somebody phones and asks, don't tell them anything. Don't fall for these gimmicks, like you won a prize, so give me your bank account detail. That's a big problem here, effective communication, and the auditor has to measure whether this is effective or not. So there is you may have to look at a cross section of employees and come to some conclusion. Then you have to simplify enforcement of not just the policy, but all the rules. I told you up to dismissing the employee, it has to be foolproof because employees can go to court also. So we're mainly focused on the employees for these controls because technology controls and software controls, nothing can, if it fails, it fails. You can't punish the machine. But if it's people failure, then you can punish the people. A machine failure, of course, it's again the audit will be pulled up for wrong assurance, but obviously you can't punish the machine. Then the corporate culture. Now this is something which we have lots of cultures like single ownership, or maybe it's like what we call centralized, decentralized, departmental, etc. There are a lot of cultures. Then we have authoritarian, etc., democratic, and okay, they copied this from the US thing. Now, the corporate culture will define how many of these controls will get incorporated into the organization. Now, let us say the corporate culture is very secretive, like IBM, or even more secretive companies like Carlyle or whatever. Then the controls will be very, very strict. I mean, extremely strict. But if it's a company which, keeps talking all the time, making a big noise, talking about their developments, that they are great people and so on, always advertising, like media companies, TV stations, then the controls will be completely different. Okay, now how important is this? If I go and post something on a blog, take for example, we went and posted some questions on a social media site. Now there's no authenticity for the questions, like how did they come and who generated, we don't know. So in such cases, what happens is we won't be able to punish the person. But if there is a clear policy to the student, you sign an agreement, any material or questions or whatever you do, you cannot share with others, then that's a corporate culture. Like our institute, of course, it's changing now. We are giving away answer papers and so on, but there are rules to be changed. Just understand this clearly, because your questions will have to be understood correctly. Answers will be 4 options, but you have to pick the right option. Then what are the challenges? Okay, all these are challenges on the communication, implementation, punishments, and so on. Now we talk about the locations and what do you protect. So one is the easy part, you just look at the physical controls. Now physical security controls are people breaking in. They break into your data center, they steal things, or you have an insider who's copying data, or there's a flood, a cyclone, something happens, earthquake. Now these are all physical problems. Now the moment you are shifted out to a cloud or to a not on premises but outside your premises, more or less you got rid of the physical security problems except for the client machines. Supposing, like for instance, now I say work at home, for instance, the chances of physical security, the requirement of physical security is greatly reduced because there's no centralized location. Nothing can go wrong. If it goes wrong, it's only a small segment of people, say power failure or flood. It's only where a small segment of employees are located, not the entire, it's not like an office or a centralized location. So these things are getting redefined, but physical security is still there, locks and doors and fire protection systems and so on. All these will be there. Okay, now this is basically here we're talking about if you have your own data center on the premises, the company is responsible for the data center. They have to take care of it. They have to protect it. They prevent unauthorized people from getting inside. Various things like fire and flood and so on. These are all the security measures if things are on site. Now, when you're auditing these security controls, you have to do a walk. You actually have to do a walkthrough, and then of course you can check the records and whatever they have. So in the traditional statutory audit, you have to give a note, which we call as ITGC controls, IT general controls. What does IT general controls mean? It means that the environment in which your information technology or information systems are surviving is all protected, like everything, like whatever access control, end user, fire, safety, networking, firewalls, etc. So that is the audit you'll be carrying out. So I would call this as one of the points in your ITGC, auditing physical controls. Environmental controls are external things like heat, cold, humidity, flood, earthquakes, fire, those kind of things. Now, why do we have to check environmental controls? Because something goes wrong, there's an earthquake, or okay, there's a flood, heavy rain, something happens. See, most of the major cities, they get flooded. There's no exception in India. So what would you like to do? Have the data center somewhere else, maybe in a remote location or a different country also. So those are the objectives, so that people don't break in. You're not work is not stopped because of uncontrolled reasons or what we call act of God or natural calamities. The environmental threats are, you can have natural threats access, not threats, and then you have man-made threats. Natural is all the flood and cyclones and so on. Man-made is these fellows who go into the data center. They may come in the form of own staff or vendors or simply attackers. It all depends. It all depends on how secure your environment is. Environmental control techniques is, okay, what do you do is select a safe site. See, for instance, we look at earthquake, okay, level 3, Chennai is level 3, but not a safe place, we say, so put it in Bangalore. But then Bangalore gets flooded. So, okay, don't put it there, put it somewhere else. So there are various things should be doing. Facilities, yes, of course, a lot of facilities are required here, electricity, humidity control, air conditioning. They call it HVAC, heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. All of them will go together. So all those facilities you'll have to put in. Emergency is if this fails, for any reason it fails, what's the backup you have? Have you got another site and so on? Maintenance, of course, we understand. You have to keep repairing and taking care of these. So there are two words which you'll be coming across. MTTR is mean time to repair. Mean means average, MEAN. Mean time to repair. MTBF means mean time between failures. So say hard disk, for instance, we say it's only a thumb rule. We say it's 3 years lifetime. So whether it fails or not, once in 3 years, the hard disks are replaced. Data is, of course, migrated to new hard disks and the old hard disks are destroyed. Hard disk may last more than 3 years. It may break down before 3 years also. But we say mean time between failure is 3 years. Now, to replace the hard disk, it may take 15 minutes, 30 minutes, because you have to do a disk image dump. If you've already been doing it, then it's easy. You can just replace it on the fly. Otherwise, if you have RAID, it will reconstruct it. Otherwise, you have to sit and copy when an operator is required. So that is called the mean time to repair. Of course, not a repair, it's a migration. But there can be repairs also. So that is possible. Then we also have this, okay, ventilation, air conditioning, I told you, power supplies. Actually, all these will go with the facilities planning, the doors, the locks, the fire sprinklers, all of them will go there. Now we have to audit all these controls. Of course, the checklists are there. ITGC is very old. I think I have something on the YouTube or LinkedIn, I'm not sure, but ITGC, you can go through it. We've done enough seminars because all the auditors today, they have to give a note on this IT working correctly. Actually, statutory auditor has to do that, but he asked the internal auditor to do it. It's okay. Anyway, somebody can do it. It's okay. Now, the logical access is what becomes more difficult because I told you can shift it to a cloud environment, etc., all gone. You're doing an RTGS. You're not gone to the bank. You're not gone to the branch. You don't know where it is also. You got to log in. You got some machine in your office. You're doing it. You're actually transferring money. Now, when that happens, who gets access to that facility? We said passwords, then we said thumb impression, okay, something. But now the point is, can it be misused? Can you stop people from using it? Can you stop people from using your mail to send something out? Now, the problem with this logical access is it gets more and more complex. So there are many ways of attacking systems. We have got this man in the middle and session hijacking. Okay, got so many methods. So the logical access has become very, very difficult. Now to make it clear for us to understand, if you want to hijack a plane, there are two ways of doing it. One is in the physical controls. The man actually books a ticket, gets onto the plane, then breaks into the cockpit, threatens the captain, and then hijacks it. That's what a rough equivalent of our environmental controls, the previous discussion. But think of a person who is able to, because most of the entertainment systems on aircraft are Linux based. They're not Windows, they're Linux based, Linux. Now, aircraft will always be in satellite communication with the ground, or they should be in satellite communication at the ground, except one Malaysian airline fellow, he switched it off and disappeared. But it'll always be in communication, satellite communication. So as a hacker, you're able to get into this because satellite communication is easy to hack. Easy means it's easy for the hacker, not us. So he's able to get into the satellite communication. He's able to get to that aircraft communication system, but he's not disturbing anything there. He's gone straight into the entertainment system because there will be absolutely no controls on the entertainment system, no firewall, no IDS, nothing will be there. Then he's able to get into the entertainment system, and from there he's able to break into the real-time computer of that aircraft which controls it, and then hijack the machine. Now, earlier it was like science fiction, but then 4 or 5 years ago, in the hacker conference, they proved how it can be done. Today, the fear is hijacking of drones. So drones, because they say drone taxi, makes a lot of sense. So somewhere in Dubai, you got off, you took a taxi, it's a drone taxi, nice. But somewhere halfway through, somebody's hijacked the drone. And then he says, if you don't give me some money in my account, I'm just going to drop the drone from the sky. So all these are possibilities, and what are the controls we have? The extreme logical access. Maybe in India, it'll take some time to have these kind of problems. But we have other problems. People misusing access rights, people using somebody else's login. Those are problems we still have. So the logical access is becoming, in fact, most of the financial frauds in India are somehow traceable to access control failures. Then we have parts of these logical access controls, like you'll have to start with the user, the operating system, the application, the network, then your web server, then your database server. It goes on and on. So there are a lot of a chain of authorizations which have to happen. Then we also have attacks and exposures. This is what I was trying to explain to you, that at every point, if you don't check, the fellow, for instance, the OS, for instance, you have cross-site scripting, he gets into your web page, then from there he's able to get into your web application, from there he gets into your database, and after that, all the data is gone. So access control is you identify, then you authenticate, then you authorize. Now, okay, don't worry the operating system, let me explain this. Let's say you bought a ticket and go to the airport. There are many types of tickets there. You can buy you may be a traveler, you get a regular passenger ticket. You're an international traveler, so you get a different type of ticket. You're a visitor, you get a different type of ticket. Otherwise, you just get ID cards, employees, staff, customs people, airport staff, and so on. At the entrance, when that, whatever the CISF or CRPF, when they check, they're only checking you for the identification. Okay, do you have a ticket? Do you have a passport? Do you have an ID card? They let you in. Or a visitor ticket, whatever, they let you in. But once you go in, there is an authentication method. So if you take a visitor's pass and try to travel, it won't work because your ticket data must be there in the airline's computer. Otherwise, you won't get a boarding pass. Now, you will have to authenticate. There's a lot of processes when you authenticate. When the staff go inside the building, the customs people go, now they have smart cards. Authentication is, okay, this person is identified, but like, are we correct about this person? Can he really be here, or what can he do? That kind of, those kind of authorizations or the authentication. The authorization tells you what you can do. Now, you cannot walk in with a visitor's ticket and go and sit in the customs counter and check baggage. So authorization, again, even in the customs, there will be levels of people. The Sipahi cannot check baggage, only the customs officers can check. So there are a lot of authorization which can change. Suppose you're the channel officer for this shift. Next shift, you may not be the channel officer. So the authorization changes again. If things are fluid like this, people are identified, it's a 24-hour, then it expires. Authentication is based on passwords which have to be changed, or you have some two-factor authentication, OTP and all that, which is about 30-minute lifetime or 5-minute lifetime. Authorization is today I can do something, but tomorrow I cannot. How do we do this? So there are multiple areas, as I told you, user level, operating system, then network, application, then network, then your database, and it goes that way. So we'll have to see how it is done. We'll have to look at some questions on that. So the techniques you use is, of course, policies and procedures, and then we have networks. You can ask a question, why should I authorize myself to a network? Now, why you authorize yourself to a network is, I'll give a simple example. You can understand the cell phone example. I got a cell phone which operates, let's say, in one state, some company, A company. But I'm trying to call my friend who's in another state, some other state. But my cell company can take my signal only within the state. Now they have to go out of state. They'll have arrangements. For instance, Airtel may have an arrangement, Idea will have a Vodafone. They'll have, even they may have overseas carriers, AT&T, Verizon, and so on. Now, when a signal is trying to go from one network to another, first of all, they'll see whether it's coming from a known carrier or unknown carrier. Known carrier, of course, intersector billing will be there, so they'll have to take care of that. So the network access itself is checked. Now, this is just a telecom. What about normal applications? So I'm going to the bank. First of all, I'm going through my internet provider. Then I reach the bank computer. Then the bank in turn has to reach the NPCI computer or some other computer, clearing ACH computer. Then each network will again authenticate and only allow. Will an end user authenticate to a network? May be rare, but users' credentials will have to be shared when you're switching networks. Application access, we all understand, particularly if it's ERP or the larger applications, the roles become very important. Database access, directly we won't be accessing, it will only be through an application. The DBA will be able to access it directly because he gets the password for that. Programs access databases through hard-coded passwords. Then operating system access we all have, because I'm sure 100% sure all of your phones and laptops, when you start it up, it'll ask you for a password or a PIN number or something that authenticates you before you start using it. Then identity and access management, I told you is some of the same thing. Unless you're identified, authenticated, and authorized, you cannot access anything. So we have something called a single sign-on, where one password can take you through multiple accesses. There are multiple technologies available, but anyway, I'll just use the words Kerberos, Active Directory, and so on. Read it in the material, but they all basically are the same. What they do is, once you authenticate yourself or you log in, or you put your thumb impression or something, what it does is it goes to a server, that's the authentication server, where for this particular person who's coming in, what are the things the person can do and for how long? So that is called a token. So it's all electronic. I mean, there's no token, no physical tokens, all electronic tokens. So I put my thumb impression, I get into the system. The token is the token server, that's called the Kerberos or the Active Directory or whatever names, LDAP. You'll see a number of names there. It goes straight there, authenticates. Then it says, okay, this person can use the payroll application for the next 4 hours. So automatically my payroll application login is enabled. It's a single sign-on. I don't have to log in again. But in the payroll, I can only run the program. I cannot change data. That's my restrictions. My token has already got that information. The payroll application has already been informed. Instead of my logging in, this token has been used electronically login. So I run my payroll program, I take the printouts and I can come out. Within 4 hours, I can come out. I have to rerun. It exceeds the 4-hour window. Again, I have to go through the whole process. The single sign-on has to be repeated, which means I've got track of the user, what he can do, what he cannot do, and also what time period, etc. The log will be complete. How effective is single sign-on? The only thing you'll find in your material in the risks is if the single sign-on server fails, Kerberos or Active Directory, whatever, fails, then everybody's logins have come to a halt. But that's okay. You have redundant servers. We have a lot of technology today where if one breaks down, the other can manage. So that's not a critical problem. Then we have these audit trails. Now these are audit trails, a very vague term because it covers everything. It covers users, what they did, when they did, how much, what did they access, what processes they activated. It also contains transaction details. In the database, audit trails means which records were stored, which were modified, which were deleted. And if it's like audit trails for network, it'll have network traffic, IP addresses. Audit trails are very huge. So the only problem you have with audit trails is how much of trails can you store? Today, because of large servers, they store it indefinitely. But small companies won't have so much space. So every 1 week or 15 days, they'll get overwritten. So the auditor has to keep backing up these audit trails because he may need it for a whole year to check certain patterns. So audit trails, the only problem here is they have to be retained because audit trails are not like data. They'll get overwritten. For instance, your phone, missed calls or whatever, say 100 missed calls capacity. When the 101st missed call comes, the first missed call will get erased. So if you want to read in it, you have to back up your missed calls. So that's what it means. The network security is because I don't want to enter into your system, break it, steal your password. I'm not interested. Instead, I steal it on the network. Like people listening to phone for conversations, they tap the phone wire. Now, similarly, you can tap network lines. You got hackers who can do that. They have the equipment to do it. So they get in and then they start meddling around with your traffic. They steal it. Then we say encrypt it. So even if he steals, he can't read it. Or you send this in small pieces in scrambled form. So you won't get all the pieces. Okay, some mechanisms we have. But there are other problems here. The network is not always stealing data. They can divert data permanently. That's called spoofing, is when they put up another server with the same IP as the original genuine server. So the data you're actually, let's say you're buying something and you'll see on the screen a message, don't touch anything on your screen, you're being diverted to a payment gateway. We trust the site. So we say, okay, payment gateway is coming, they take my credit card, they take the money, a debit card, whatever. But supposing that fellow has spoofed the server, I mean, some thief, hacker. Instead of going to the payment gateway, genuine payment gateway, it has gone to that fellow's server, which is a fake payment gateway. Now he'll get your card number and all your details, your PIN and your OTP and whatever, and he'll steal your money. So that is called spoofing, where one genuine server is replaced by a fake server. To easily understand this, if you watch some of these movies, let's say you're sending somebody to the airport to pick up someone who has never seen, but he's holding a board. His name is XYZ, he's holding the board. The other fellow has seen his name XYZ, he also writes it on the board, but he's able to go into a little before him and stand. So when the real XYZ comes, he'll pick up the fake driver and go off, whereas the real driver is standing a little way behind. The first board he sees, he'll respond. So a lot of this spoofing is possible. Phishing comes when you have email or websites, when they are look like genuine websites. You see it all the time in your newspapers and your WhatsApp also get a lot of warnings. It looks like a genuine site, it is not. So you go in there and you type your credentials and then they steal it. So that's phishing part of it. Then you have man in the middle attack where he's waiting. The moment you connect up, he disconnects you and he connects himself and continues the session. Then you have this, there's another thing called piggybacking where almost same thing. Only thing he doesn't wait from the beginning. He just keeps looking for active connections. He disconnects one of them. Then he puts himself in place of the original user and continues the transaction. Most of the time it will be theft of money, most common. The second most common is theft of data, sensitive data, where it's probably useful to them. The other thefts like, damaging your server, putting in virus, they are little less because anyway your firewalls, etc. will be working, but still they do it. But the most important problem is financial systems are prone to network hacking quite a lot. Then comes wireless networks. These are generally attacked to pick up confidential information, including Bluetooth devices. I think you have a range of 30 meters, which is like 100 feet if you have a good Bluetooth device. Okay, let's say we have a very cheap Bluetooth device also, at least 10 feet distance, it will pick up, like in malls, railway stations, etc. So you can easily steal the data. That's all the current trends in attacks. That's called blue whaling and a lot of stuff, because people today use a lot of wireless devices and satellite also, told you that. Okay, now when you get in the control, one is your architecture. So you have the bus, the ring, the star, then you'll have the mesh. Of course, your architecture, you make it into subdomains. So keep your networks in small sub networks and then connect it to the main network. Okay, what's the advantage? Advantage is a theft takes place or a hacker attack is there. It affects only one subdomain. It doesn't bring your entire network down. Cryptography is making the data unreadable. You encrypt it. So if I steal it, I won't make any sense out of it. Only if I can decrypt, I'll be able to read it. So we talk in terms of one key That is, if you're using symmetric cryptography, you use this, say, okay, there are two components here. There's what is called the algorithm and what is called the key. Algorithm is public, like DES or AES or whatever, this public. That means all of us know how the algorithm works, no problem on that. The secret part is the key. So what this algorithm does is, it'll ask you for a number, some key. Okay, key can be alphabets also. Now that number, okay, let's say 1, 2, 3, 4. So when I give this 1, 2, 3, 4, the algorithm does some calculations and it jumbles up my data, makes it into different characters. Unless the other person knows that the key is 1, 2, 3, 4, he won't be able to undo whatever was encrypted. So the decryption can take place only if the key is available. So many times we think the algorithm is confidential. Algorithms are not confidential. They will be there in a asymmetric, it will be there in the certificate itself. It is the key which is secret. So in the single key cryptography or a symmetric cryptography, what happens is there's only one key. It is known to both the sender and the receiver. The sender will use this key, run through the algorithm. Let's say DES is called data encryption standard. AES, advanced encryption standard. They have it on your phones also. So you use one of them, and there are a lot of this thing, blowfish, twofish, a lot of algorithms are there. So I use this algorithm, put the key, encrypt, send it to you. You use the same key, same algorithm, decrypt, then you'll get the information. Now the problem is, this is only if you know each other, we know the keys are there and all this is fine. What happens if I'm sending a mail to the CA Institute? What happens if I'm doing some kind of sending application or say interview letters to candidates? I don't know, I can't share the key with all of them. That's a big problem. So then you go in for the next thing, which is called the asymmetric cryptography. They call it public key infrastructure, PKI. Now there, same thing, algorithm is same, but the keys, you need two keys. So how will you get two keys? So the algorithm which generates the key, there's a separate algorithm to generate the key. There's a separate algorithm to encrypt the data, the two separate. This algorithm which generates the keys, when I run that program, it will give me two keys. One of them I will keep, which is called the private key. If it's my key, I'll keep that as my private key. The other key, I will give it to some public hoster. They're called certificate authorities. Of course, they'll generate the key, but doesn't matter. But we'll put it in some public place. That is called the public key. Public key is accessible to everybody in the world. Whoever is on the internet, they want my public key, they can take it. But my private key is known only to me. I have to keep it safely. If I lose it, again, I have to generate a key pair. I can't generate one key alone. So the key pair, one key, the two keys will get generated. One which the owner has is the private key. One which everybody can access is called the public key. Now, how does this mechanism work? So we'll have to work with some public authorities. We call them root. In fact, in India, it is called Root Certificate Authority of India, RCAI. You can look up their websites. All these people are there. RCAI is for the root authority. And of course, we have the certificate authorities. So I go to one of them, let's say TCS, and then I pay them some money and say, I want this digital certificate. Because all of you will have, because you're filing your taxes and all that. Only thing, they don't really put the encryption, they're only for signature. If you want the encryption part, you have to pay a little more money, the class 3 or some certificate. Okay, let's say you bought that, and then they'll give you a small USB looking thing that's your private key, which is stored on that. So anyway, I paid this money to TCS. TCS generated two keys. They gave me one key they kept themselves. The key they gave me, I have to keep it safe. I mean, that's my responsibility. So when I'm sending an email to the candidates who are being called for the interview, I will digitally sign each of these and encrypt each of these with my personal key, private key. The algorithm is public, no problem about that. Only the key is a big secret. So when the mail reaches the other side and he tries to open it, it will be junk. But when he tries to open it, is mail software, whatever the software he's using, Outlook or Google or something, whatever, his mail software will read a portion of that mail called a certificate. The digital certificate goes with this content you're sending. It contains who is the service provider, etc. So his machine, the candidate's machine will contact the service provider. They'll check the credentials. He has to have credentials, otherwise they won't give it to him. And then they'll give him the public key. So with the public key, he can decrypt my email and read it. So the key management is not in our hands. It is in the hands of the certificate authority. And of course, they can revoke it. If something happens, it expires, it's stolen. All this you will be reading anyway. But if you're reading the cyber law, there's a full sections on it, but you don't worry on that. If you have time, look up the Root Certificate Authority of India, RCAI. Just look up their website. So you'll be able to get all this. Now, just understand the concepts, because the multiple choice will always be on the concepts. So cryptography, we have two: the single key, symmetric; two keys, asymmetric. Asymmetric is a lot of terms in it: public key, private key, root authority, the certification authority, digital certificate, etc., etc. So that's one part of it. What's the second part of it? The second part of it is we are not only encrypting, you also produce what is called a hash, H-A-S-H. Now, hash is of course, official name for it is called a digital signature. Now, when you have a digital signature and you attach it to your mail or whatever, your data, at the other end, they will regenerate the digital signature. If both the signatures are the same, then it's the same content. If they are not the same, the content has got tampered with. So that is also very important, that we understand that PKI, the asymmetric, gives us more advantages, not just the encryption. It is also giving us data integrity, because we are hashing, the signature is there, and if it doesn't reproduce the same signature, then the message is tampered with. The third advantage you get is, I sent it using my private key, the candidate got it, and when his machine contacts the root server or the certificate authority has already checked his credentials. If he doesn't have credentials, they won't give him the public key. So they checked his credentials and gave the public key, and then he decrypted. Then sometime later, he doesn't come for the interview. Then he says, I never received your email. Now, we don't know whether he didn't receive or what happened. But the certificate authority has a record that at this particular time, based on a particular digital certificate, a request was made for the public key. And obviously, the digital certificate has gone with this mail which you sent for the interview. So now he cannot say, I did not receive it, because an independent third party has proof that he actually got this public key, and then obviously we can't say he read it, but it's obviously he received it. We can't say he read it, but he received it. Now that's like a recorded delivery, like registered post, you received it. So that is called non-repudiation. So you cannot deny having sent or having received. Having sent, because obviously they'll know because I use my private key. Having received, they will know because obviously you used my public key. So three things are happening. Now you got your encryption, you got your hash, which ensures the integrity of the data, that's the digital signature. Then you got a non-repudiation, because there's a third party who can now say, yes, this man sent it, yes, that man received it. So an asymmetric, you got more advantages. Okay, that's fine. Then we come to the remote access, which means you're working remotely, and now you have, obviously you got to connect up. So the usual way we do it is through internet. It's called public network. But if you connect to a public network, all the stories I told you, they'll steal your data or they'll meddle around with it. So you have to use some kind of encryption again, not for the data alone, but for the connection itself. So when you use a remote access, what actually happens is you set up what is called a virtual private network. It's called VPN. You'll also see words like IP security, IPsec, IP, capitals in Internet Protocol, then SEC is security. Or you'll see tunneling, or you'll see layer 2 tunneling protocol, Layer 2 tunneling, L2TP you'll find. You may also find P2P, peer-to-peer. Okay, whatever words you're going to see in your study material, concept is the same. What is the concept? I want to connect my laptop to some server somewhere, and I'm not just sending encrypted data over a public internet. I want to set up a connection which is encrypted and it looks like private. Now, what is the reason for doing that? The reason is, If I'm coming from, let's say my machine is connected to some Airtel, that machine is connected to BSNL, the two different networks, and there's a private public internet network somewhere. So all this happens. Now the server will say this is an outside request, so I cannot give full rights because your firewall has got some rules and a lot of rules in the access. Now I want this machine to appear as if it is a terminal sitting in the premises of that server itself. Like I'm work from home, they won't allow me full access. For instance, you call a support desk today. What will happen is the boy sits at home. He's not sitting in his Google office or Flipkart office or somewhere. So what he does is he connects up, but it looks like he's working in Google because that VPN, the virtual private network, what it has done is it has encrypted and it has now made this remote laptop or remote desktop, a phone, appear like it is in the same premises as the server. Now that's very important when you work with cloud because you can't go to the cloud premises. You're working outside the cloud premises, but the cloud server should think you're a part of the network directly connected to the cloud server and not through a remote connection, public network. So that's where you use the word VPN. Virtual is like imaginary or whatever. Private is network is you're within the LAN. You're not in the LAN, you're actually outside, you're using internet. But inside the server thinks you're still in the LAN because it's a VPN connection. Just remember that a VPN will make it appear as if you are in the local area network of the server. Then of course we have these malicious attacks, malware as we call it, firewalls, IDS. There are three things. One more should be here. Intrusion protection system. Now all these what they do is they have rules because rules are framed by the humans. They have policies based on which they wrote the procedures and so on. Then they block certain addresses, they unblock certain addresses. So we have what is called firewall rule. We say deny all, then you open accesses to certain. Other is allow all, you deny accesses to certain. It all depends. But anyway, the firewall rules will be subject to firewall audit, IDS audit. HIDS means host intrusion detection system. NIDS means network intrusion. So what difference is host intrusion detection or host intrusion prevention will work on the server. Network intrusion detection or network intrusion prevention will work in the network. So difference is, are you protecting all traffic to the network or are you specifically protecting it to the server? You can do both, protect both. Firewall is only when your public network and the private network are connecting or your DMZ is connecting to your internet. So now the whole story is, what are we actually connecting and what are we maintaining? Okay, so now there's a question. Okay. Question is, what is a VPN? Okay, VPN, see, I'll put it this way. See, we have to start with the concept of a LAN, local area network. LAN is like in a building, we have machines, we have network, put cables, put a server, we start using it. Then one of the people wants to work from outside, an executive is traveling, or the MD wants to check with his phone. Now he's not in the office, he's outside the office. But if he comes from outside, the access rules will be different because the policies are already written. For visitors, this is the policy. For insiders, this is the policy and so on. Now, if he comes in from outside, obviously the machine will treat him as an outsider only. Firewall rules will say this fellow is outsider. He cannot do many things. But he's an insider, but working from outside. So what your VPN software does is, it builds a virtual circuit. Virtual means nothing. It basically encrypts at both ends. So the data is not only encrypted, that is, if you use PKI, your data is encrypted. The connection is encrypted using the VPN software. That's a separate software. You can have a VPN connection and your data can go safely through this protected circuit, or you can have a VPN connection. You can also encrypt your data. That is for great safety. You may encrypt your data and also put it in a VPN connection. Actually, the problem is, the more encryption, the more powerful machines you require. And you have to pay for it. You have to buy all these certificates. And of course, big corporates, they don't mind the expense, so that's fine. But let's say it's a smaller company, then they will also be looking at budget. So how much of encryption depends. If you're using more encryption, you pay more money. So anyway, now coming back to my story on this VPN. So the VPN software should be at both ends, client and server end. The moment you enable the connection to the server, first the VPN software sets up a secure connection, which means, okay, use these words, tunnel, Tunnel. What it has done is it has set up the connection in such a way that any data going through it, the header of that packet is suppressed. That is, the actual packet header is suppressed. Instead, it puts a VPN header, which means nobody will know it's that type of data. So it's something like you're sending a valuable, say, a diamond parcel, but you have packed it up like, say, fruits or something and put the perishable, this, that, and sent it. So a thief will look at the parcel from the outside label and say this is useless and throw it away. When it reaches the other end, of course, they know what actually is inside. They'll peel off the outer wrapper. Inside is another stronger wrapper. They'll peel that off, get the diamonds. Think of it like that. I mean, some example. So what happens in the VPN is it sets up an encrypted connection. It's able to move the data from one point to the other through a encryption of its own, continuous encryption for the traffic going on the network. This has nothing to do with your own packet encryption. This is the connection itself is encrypted. That's one part. Second part is it also makes it appear that this remote machine is a part of the LAN, the local area network. So when your firewall receives a signal from outside, in the firewall rule, it won't look like an outside traffic. It'll look like an inside traffic. So obviously inside traffic may not go to the firewall, but when the firewall rules are configured, we are configured for VPN. So when the outside connection comes also, it looks like an inside connection. So the firewall says, okay, you're inside user, you can do whatever you're authorized to do, and it lets it in. So a VPN actually does two things. One, it protects your data when it's on the public network. Second, it makes that remote machine appear as if it's on the local LAN. So when there's work from home, particularly after this pandemic, almost everybody is on VPN because they have to appear as if they are on the local site. Otherwise, the server will not allow them to access insider information. So they all work on the VPN, so that's taken care of. So that's the remote access part of it. These firewalls and intrusion detection systems and the intrusion prevention systems keep looking for patterns. The rules are set, certain banned sites or they look for certain patterns in the data like virus signatures and hackers patterns. Everybody's got a pattern somewhere. That's the whole idea now with your data analytics and pattern analytics. So you're immediately able to identify this traffic doesn't look like our traffic, looks like some outsider is getting in, and it stops it. Detection is, it will only tell you. Prevention, it will stop. Firewall also will stop, it will reject it. But still, by carefully manipulating, hackers still get into systems. Now, wireless, again, you have the same problem. When you probably switch on your phone or your laptop, you also see a lot of other wireless connections which are not yours. Of course, you try to click on it, it will say password protected, but then the point is passwords can be broken. So you can break into other people's wireless and steal their information. Endpoint security is mostly these, today we say mobile devices. Earlier it was desktops, but today desktops don't seem to be the major problem. Major problem is phones, tablets, and laptops. Now, what is happening with those machines is they are all 100% wireless. Phones particularly, they are not even wireless. They go through a cellular network. Cellular networks are not encrypted. They don't encrypt. Only applications can encrypt. That's the fight going on between the government and the service providers. WhatsApp encrypts, Twitter encrypts, and so on. So the encryption is done by the service provider in the app. Basically, the airline, I mean, the Airtel or whoever, I mean, the service provider, he doesn't encrypt anything. So endpoint security is becoming a nightmare because a lot of people use mobile devices. Not just for controlling data, they also switch on air conditioners, IoTs work on your refrigerators and all that. A lot of data keeps going out. We don't know if it's encrypted or not. So if it's not encrypted, auditor has a lot of concerns now. VoIP is for what we are doing is now VoIP, that's voice over internet protocol, all the Zoom, etc. Before that, they called it video conferencing. If you notice, there are two separate parts here. The voice, they said voice over internet protocol, actually it's like a phone, VoIP phones. That's like a WhatsApp phone call. But then if you're doing a WhatsApp video or like on the Zoom, Right now, I switched off the camera, but see, the camera is not a part of the protocol on what we're using for Zoom. The camera is a separate IoT. That's why when you're doing your electronic exams, when they're proctoring, the exam question paper, etc., all that is coming to you from your exam site. The camera is being monitored by the company which is proctoring you, like say Pearson View or Metal or someone there checking it out. That is why you have to be very careful with your cameras, because a hacker can just steal your camera, control the camera alone, which means he's able to see everything wherever your phone is moving. The camera is working all the time, it's sending out information. So that's why the auditors have a little bit of technology will be required. IoT is there in your 6th module. And then you have the vulnerability assessment, there's weaknesses in the system, and checking whether the weakness can be exploited. That's why we say vulnerability assessment is to find the weaknesses. Penetration testing is to see if the weakness can be exploited. Suppose there is a weakness, but nothing can be exploited, or even if you exploit, it's worthless. For instance, I have very weak passwords, but the data there is useless data, public data. I have downloaded RBI circulars and put them on that server. Somebody steals the server. Basically, no point, because anyway, they're public domain. But if I've got my checklist or confidential audit reports, or particularly in listed companies, your financial data, then that's a different story. Then, of course, you have to monitor all these controls. And auditing this security, there's a checklist, so you can go through it. Okay, so I think that should take us through. If you have any questions, please put them on the chat. I have only 2 questions. I've answered both of them. If you have questions, please go ahead. So what I'll do is I'll just quickly run through this set of questions. See, what I've done is, of course, this is there in your WhatsApp group also. Somebody has posted it. This is a publication from the Material Institute itself. I'm just using public domain things, so no copyright, nothing violated. So what you do is, answers are also there. But let me just explain these, because I quickly run through these. Now, I want you to go through these. These are good. Actually, most of the questions will repeat. But just watch out for the additional questions or a modification where some more information is being added in terms of the answers. Question may be same, but answers can differ. So I told you about VPN. I told you about so many things now, some DREAD, OWASP, etc. Earlier we didn't have frameworks. Now we got frameworks. So just adding some stuff to it, so you can just keep that in mind. And also, I think this module gives you the maximum number of questions also. I think so. This is yeah, you get 44 questions from this module. This is the largest question segment. Of course, the other two will be 36 each. This is 44 questions. Feel free to even post it in your group, even after your classes are over. Don't worry, you can post it. There's no problem. I will definitely answer your questions. Just keep your group alive till you finish your exam, July 31st or something. Okay, now to secure wireless connections, you asked the question. See, wireless connections also have to be encrypted, but the encryption is slightly different. You will have WPA, that's called, actually it's the wired protocol application. Actually, in the early days, what they did was between wired and wireless, only the physical layer, the medium was different. You had cable, fiber optic, then you had microwave. Microwave is this wireless. But then WPA was easily hacked, because to steal data from an electric wire, I have to cut the wire, I have to splice it, etc. Fiber optic is even more difficult. But wireless, it's like easy. I don't have to cut anything, nothing. I just need one more wireless unit. I can tap the signal. So then they went in for WPS. Then you have WPA2. There are different protocols. Okay, basically all these protocols do only one thing: they encrypt the data. But in addition to that, I'm sure you've seen this in your house also. They call it a router, but a router, as they call it. Americans pronounce root as route. So it's a router. You'll find some aerial on it, 2 aerials or 4 aerials or whatever. Now, actually, it's 3 devices packed into one. It is working as an ADSL or DSL modem, which means the wire coming from the service provider's box is coming into that router. it'll do analog digital conversion. Or if it's bringing a digital signal directly to your house, then the modem component won't be there. Second, it's also working as a router, which means it's assigning IP addresses to all your devices, including your computer, your phone, and whatever devices you have. Third, it's also working as a wireless access point. It's also broadcasting that internet connection wirelessly through the aerials. So when you're fixing things in your house, it's recommended that you can take the device close to that router. There'll be a button on that machine which is called WPS encryption. You just press that, and then the passwords are generated, and these two machines will set up a VPN or what you call an encrypted connection. So if a third party breaks into your network, let's assume he stole your password, he broke into it, still he makes no sense of the communication. So in the wireless, of course, the communication is the same as cable or fiber optic. Fiber optic uses light, cable uses electricity, and microwave is used by radio waves, I mean this wireless. But the main thing is encryption is available for all of them. That's the security measure you'll use. Second, your network devices are identified by what is, of course, you'll have the IP addresses, but you have what is called an SSID. Now that is unique for each mobile network you set up. So I just want you to remember that a wireless network is identified by its SSID. Devices on the network are identified by their IP addresses. That'll do for the exam. You can leave it. You want to study more, no problem, but you can do it later. You don't overstudy for the exam. Just get through the exam first. Okay. Now on this protection of these assets, we have. Okay, I'll just run through these questions. Okay, you're not supposed to see the answer. That's okay. See the answer. It's all right. I see the first time you see the answer, it's fine. But next time onwards, try to do it without seeing the answer. Try to do this 2 or 3 times till you kind of subconsciously memorize it. Okay, to protect critical data from virus attacks, they are limiting access, internet access to their employees. Now, risk response is of 4 types. One, you can avoid the risk. That means don't even take up that operation, just avoid it. The risk is not there. Or you can transfer the risk. Most of the time, transfer means insurance. But today, you have to remember transfer as outsourcing also. But of course, new risks may come with outsourcing or with insurance. But generally, transfer means a third party now takes over the risk. We used to say insurance, but today there's an outsourcing portion in your material somewhere. You'll find it. You have to study it. Okay, the third is you can absorb the risk or you can retain the risk. That is, okay, I'll do this business. I will take this risk and I will, it's okay. Even if I lose money, it's okay. It's a small part only. Tolerable risk. Then the next one is mitigate the risk. Mitigate means you want to reduce it. You want to find a control for it. You may be able to do 100% mitigation also, certain risks, not all risks. Certain risks you may be able to protect completely. Certain risks, of course, you may not be able to protect completely. Okay, that's okay, but at least you have got controls in place. So the question asked is, what is the type of risk transfer method you're using? Are you retaining it? That's okay, the answer is here. Are you reducing the risk? Are you not doing the business at all, not even looking at the risk? Are you retaining the risk fully in your business? Or are you giving this risk to somebody else? Now, the question here is they decided to limit internet access to employees. Means some will not be allowed at all. Some will be allowed with some firewall rules or something. Or what they may do is they may not allow it in the LAN. They may put separate machines, 5 or 6 machines separately, not connected to this office LAN called the intranet, which is this 4 or 5 machines directly connect to the internet. Any virus attack problem, only those 4 machines will be affected. They'll format them again. So what they have done is they have mitigated, maybe 100%, 50% doesn't matter, but they have mitigated the risk. Now, if you look at the next question, okay, maybe I'll avoid the answer for a minute. A production company decides to insure, okay, that's like transfer. Again, okay, I won't take the repeat questions. We'll go for the ones. Okay. Implementation of an information control ensures that what happens is you're transferring the risk, you're making sure your governance is achieved. That is outcome from business process. The layers come like this. The board of governors, the board of directors will fix the governance objectives. Simply understand it as mission and vision. That will do. The top management will be given these governance objectives. Now they have to formulate how they will achieve it and what controls they'll have, which to protect themselves from not being able to achieve it. Then the operational and technical management, middle and lower management, will actually carry out the operations, the day-to-day controls and so on. So when you're putting this information system controls in organization, it is to ensure that your governance objective is achieved. Here we won't use the word corporate governance, we'll use the word IT governance. I think it's your second module. Okay, it'll be there somewhere. They shuffled up all the modules between DISA 2 and 3. I'm not seeing much of a difference, except in the 6th module, emerging technology. That's only place where content is changed. And also I found a lot of your hardware definitions have been removed. If you have any doubts, just post them in the group. I'll put the answers there. For instance, I found routers, switches, but nowhere was it explained what it does. You got DNS poisoning, but nobody explained what is a DNS. So if you have any doubts, please post them. Run through the material. Don't just stop with these questions. Questions are good. I mean, go through them, but also go through your material. Okay, anyway, here we are talking about the governance. So it's a B. Desired outcome from business process is not affected. If they had put IT governance objectives or upper governance objectives, I'm sure all the students would have ticked it off. But if the moment they change the English like this, you have to read it. Okay, which of the following leads to destruction of assets, information assets? Okay, information assets are everything, hardware, software, data. And today we also talk about networks, network devices, and subscriptions to various services. They all come under software asset management. The ISO for that is 17,990. That's the ISO standard for protection of assets. But you don't have it. You have only ISO 27,000 and something in your material. Okay. Now, which the destruction of this information assets is data error during data entry. Obviously, wrong data, nothing will happen to your assets. Non-maintenance of privacy, the data will get stolen. Unauthorized access to computer systems, you can break in. It all depends. English is like vague, so it can be physical break-in, logical break-in. It can cause damage. Logical break-in, data and software will go. Physical break-in, hardware will go. Using systems that do not meet user requirements will only cause SDLC problems, nothing to do with your destruction of assets. Then maintenance of privacy in relation to data collected by an organization is important because errors during data entry, they will cause damage. That is correct. It has an impact on the infrastructure business. That is also correct. It can be easily accessed by third parties. That's also correct if you don't maintain proper privacy. It contains critical sensitive information pertaining to a customer. Now we have to see the most correct answer. In fact, all of them are correct statements here. So when you are trying to maintain privacy in relation to data collected by the organization, where the organization now becomes the custodian, it is not the owner. It contains critical and sensitive information relating to a customer or whatever supplier or whoever. So this is the most important. All are correct. All 4 are correct. If you argue, all 4 are correct. Because sometimes after the exam, students write to the institute saying, I wrote the correct answer. Now, if there are many correct answers, we have to make sure that you got the most correct answer. So the critical and sensitive information is your headache. So that's the correct answer. Okay, that's right. Somebody's asked for the email. I can give it to you. It's not a problem. Okay. I just typed in my email in the chat. I typed it correctly. It's very small letters. Okay. Okay, it's pauljayakar@gmail.com. So you shouldn't have a problem. Okay, anyway, you'll find my email all over the place. Okay, anyway, that's fine. That's okay. Now, okay. Okay, we'll just go to some other questions. We'll get in the auditing part of it. The auditing the characteristics of the system to meet substantial user requirements, which objective of the IS audit attest. Data integrity, system effectiveness, asset safeguarding, system efficiency. Now, between effectiveness and efficiency, is effective is getting the work done. Efficiency is getting the work done in the most economical or optimal manner. They use the word optimal, which means everything is balanced, time, cost, everything. Now, if you want to meet the user requirements, it has to be effective. Obviously, efficiency may be a difficult thing to achieve because sometimes you have to trade off. I told you encryption will slow down unless you buy better, faster machine. Cost will go up, etc. So effectiveness should be good enough. So your answer will be effectiveness. And the problem is you have to choose the most correct answer. A, B, and D both are correct, but B is more correct. Okay. Unfortunately, that's how these multiple choices work. A statement of purpose achieved by implementing control procedures in a particular IT process is defined as, see, a statement of purpose means why do you want that particular control? It's called like an objective of an audit. Because many times I ask students, why do we audit? What's the objective of the audit? Only then can we build the audit plan, the checklist, questionnaire, the report. If the audit is to just tell them everything is fine, that's an objective. If it is to find a fraud, that's an objective. If it is for something else, GST or something, that's an objective. So here, what is the objective? I'm rewording the English. Statement of purpose is what is the objective of the control? So obviously, the objective of the control is the control objective. So I told you that first we need to define the control objective. In the RCM, risk and control matrix, you have to define this control objective. If you have, so what I suggest is after the exam, you can go through this because one of the difficulties we are facing from the institute side is after the exam qualification is over, most of our DISA students are not updating themselves. Okay, fine. We should have some seminars. That's okay, but you have to update yourself. So go to COSO RCM. I have posted something in the YouTube and my LinkedIn. It's about an hour long thing, but that's for the real auditors who are doing this RCM. So please go through it when you have time after the exam, just to update yourselves on this. Which of the following is an example of technical implementation of internal control? Policies, we have a security guard, it's a human control, locking the room, it's also there. Investing in tools and software, that is the technical control. Now, just to mislead you, instead of locking the room, supposing we said biometric lock for the room containing sensitive documents, still that becomes a physical lock only. Because once we say room, sensitive documents, etc., it is not sensitive data on the server. So even if you put a smart lock or what one dead man door or whatever, just ignore it because the room says, okay, room means physical only. So basically, only when you're looking at logical access, the fourth one, D, investing in tools and techniques or software to restrict unauthorized access to information is a logical access control. So that will be the correct answer. Even though it's not so clear here, I'm giving you the answer. So, okay, the preventive, detective, etc. That's fine. Let's go to some other questions. So, an organization decides to control. Okay, this again, basically, okay, you can understand these. These are not the important ones. Let me go a little further down because we have other questions here. Okay, now the roles which of one should an auditor not perform. Refrain is you should not get involved in. One is giving assurance risks are being evaluated. Obviously, that's part of your RCM activity. Implementing risk response. Okay, obviously the answer is clear. You cannot write the management's response that they have to write. Risk management process is correct. Review the key risks. That's correct. A key risk will be high key, low key. I mean, the key risk means if that risk materializes, if the risk is actually going to happen, threat, then what will happen is your systems will completely come to a halt. Now, key risks, for instance, is not updating your patches on the operating system and network. Now we have a problem called ransomware, where people come into your system. They're not a virus kind of guys, but they lock up your system, they encrypt your data, and then they'll ask you money to decrypt it. Now, the recent ransomware attacks, if you're following the FBI directives, US government has issued, Indian government has not yet issued, but what they are doing is they're not only encrypting and asking for money, they are also copying the data and asking two ransoms. One is, I'll decrypt your data so you can continue your business. Or if you pay me more money, then I will not release this data in the public domain. Now you have to see whether the data is really sensitive or not. So generally what we say is sensitive data, keep it encrypted. So the guy steals it, it's no use to him. But if you don't encrypt it, and almost all the password thefts and the credit card thefts, credit card number thefts, are because these chaps are not been encrypting things properly. They use default encryption. The problem with this default encryption is everybody knows what the encryption is. So what's the point? There's no point. Okay, then something else. Audit you will be able to understand. I'm sure you have no problems. If you have any technology-based questions, because that's the only problem I have with all students of all courses. If you have technology-based questions, please ask me, because the whole chapter is missing in that material. Only I reviewed it completely, but then can't change anything. So you can read up. If you have an older material or if you have ISCA material, also read it up, no problem. The final students, they had a paper that also got removed, but that's okay. You can read it. Some of your apprentices will have. Okay. Now, who is the person responsible for creating new system accounts and changing permission of user accounts? Now, when we say accounts, this is logins, basically logins and the authentication and the authorization. So identification, somebody will do, HOD will issue a letter. This man joined our company, he's our employee, give him login, identification over. Now, how do we authenticate him? I mean, it's a password or some OTP or something. And how do we authorize him? And what can he do? So now who is allowed to do that? The user manager, system administrator, super user, security manager. This is for creating new user accounts. Obviously, a system administrator only will do it. Now you got to keep track of the system administrator, because the system administrator, that's why I said background checks will differ for different people. If the system administrator makes mistakes or wrongly allows people, then we'll have a serious problem. Okay, see, actually these this material I'm actually showing you is actually a publication from the institute itself. See, and so they like practice manual for CISA, they published it. That's okay. Go through it. That's fine. You can download it from the institute site. But anyway, my point is this: please go through the questions. If you can do 3,000 questions, that's the best. But about 2,000 should be okay. But at least read the material 2 or 3 times, because we need to get familiar with all the terms, because I'm not sure if these questions will cover 100% of the terms. Some new term, for instance, in your module 6, you got blockchain, I got IoT, etc. So even in this module, I saw something. I tried to trace it because I got the soft copy. I'm using find. I'm not able to find it. So which means we have used words like DNS without explaining what it is. So just go through them. Okay, so that will be helpful. Okay, I think you could go through the rest of it. I think these questions are okay. You can just go to these questions. From the exam preparation point of view, what I would suggest is that you do both. Read the materials. Materials are very small now. Of course, they're quite big, but they're much smaller than what they used to be. So you can just quickly run through the materials, at least for the terminology. Then work out all these old questions. I mean, all these are there or no, nothing to work out. It's not a problem. You just have to identify. Subconsciously, you will end up memorizing it also, which is very important. See, for DISA 2.0, except for the reshuffling of the chapters, in fact, I think this is DISA 2.0. I think this is the slightly older one, just before 2.0. It's all the same portion. They only shuffled it up and down because when I did the research, they're not done much except for that last module. Emerging technology 2.0 is slightly lesser, 3.0 is slightly more. But that's only few questions. You will get 12, only 12 questions. It's not much. Oh, sorry, 16 questions from there. But this module, you'll get 44 questions. So 44 and the other previous two modules is 36, 36. So study these very, very thoroughly. You need 75%. So the only exam strategy is listen to these videos again and again, go through these questions, and I think you should be ready for the exam. So you will get through. That's from the exam point of view. But thereafter, you need to update your skills. I'm not criticizing anyone, but when the RBI has brought up a new rule, everybody said they are supporting the big four, they are not supporting the big four, etc. It's not that, it's a question of competence now because RBI, I mean, banks have become fintechs. So we need to understand that wherever there are seminars, please attend DISA-based seminars, or you can organize it in the same group of centers. What I mean, I leave that to you because that's outside the scope of our course for today. How many questions? You'll have 200 questions. You'll have to get 75% right. You'll have to get them right to 75%. So what I would suggest is in these 200 questions, first answer all that you know. You will know a lot of them. At least 50-60% will definitely be known to you. After that, spend time on the questions you don't know. Don't start with the ones you don't know because you'll be wasting time. So once you do that, then you'll have a lot of problems. 75%, I said, somebody said 60%. I think they were talking about pass rate. Pass rate is not 60%, if I'm right. It's less than that. Okay, anyway, it doesn't matter about that. I won't get into the institute politics, but anyway, I can only tell you the number of questions and our pass mark, not the pass percentage of candidates, pass mark. Okay, so that you'll have to get clearly. The pattern is module 1, 18%, module 2, 16%, module 3, 18%, module 4, 18%, module 5, 22%, module 6, 8%. This is percent. But since there are 200 questions, just double it. So module 1 will be 36 questions, module 2 will be 32 questions, and so on. They won't appear in order. They'll jumble it up. I think the usual process is there are 3 sets of paper. So the questions will get jumbled up in the sets also. So if you're, sometimes the students tend to copy question 1, answer A, touches his nose or ear or something. But the question 1 in the other paper will be different. So then they'll get the answer wrong. So my advice is you just study hard and somehow get through. No, because see what happens is if you have to get 75%, you have to be thorough with all modules. So don't take a specific module approach, take all module approach. See, it's easy. Most of the questions you'll know if you run through these old questions, and I don't know if you're still getting access to the question bank. They have some question bank. I don't know if you still have access to it or they stopped it. I'm not sure. It doesn't matter if there's not there. There's no negative marking. There's no negative marking. There's no negative marking at all. Yes, whatever help you need, you can mail, but make your question very clear. You can definitely reach me through mail. There's no problem at all. There's no negative marking, and see, the general thing is to answer all the right questions first. It's a optic mark ticking, so you can always erase the answer or go back, come back to the unknown ones later. Don't waste time because it's I think you get 1.8 minutes per question. It's about 1.8 minutes. Try to finish it in 1 minute. That 0.8 you can keep for the unknown questions. You can keep a lot of time at the end to help you out with the questions you don't know the answer for. Then you can use intuition. Yeah, CISA question bank will be beyond our syllabus. That's a little difficult. Please don't do that. CISA portion is, though we say they're all equal, they are not. CISA will be much more difficult. So don't spend your time on it. Just finish this off. You can get a lot of CISA question banks, but my advice is it'll be a little too much. And now this new CISA, they put in these 5 domains, and in 2019 they modified. It's a different thing where they take audit and they run you through the entire course. Whereas we are treating these as independent things like logical protect. This is the old CISA concept. Logical protection separately, then governance separately, so on. Many of your material writers are CISA, so they always bring in this COBIT, and that's fine. No, your exam will be only 3 hours, I think. It's not 6 hours. Okay, then it's not 1.8. Then we have to make it less. Okay, yeah, I think you can do it. I forgot all the time, not long time since I took these classes, but anyway, it's the same thing. So, and don't worry, maybe my calculation is wrong. Maybe it's not 1.8 minutes. Okay, fine. 200 questions you'll have to do in 3 hours. So, okay, figure out whatever the calculation is. Okay, if you have any other question, I'll definitely answer. Otherwise, we can wind up.
Yeah. Members, for any questions, please unmute yourself or raise your hand. You can ask the speaker or type in chat box.
Day before yesterday on the first day, I think Prasanna sir was saying.
Only thing, I'm not able to hear you.
Sir, can you speak loud, sir?
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Can you please speak little louder?
Yeah, the first day, Mr. Prasanna sir was saying, or second day, that OMR system of examination has been approved.
No, which OMR? It's always been OMR only.
No, it's something like.
Oh, the online. Online. Okay. You take the exam at the terminal instead of ticking on papers. But they're trying to put all these centers wherever computers are available. I'm sure they've done inspection in your areas also. It's okay. Same procedure again. Only thing is on the screen, if you mark an answer and you want to come back to it, I think you have to click a button which says review.
Yeah, that's okay. No, just I want to know two things. Like we were having our exam for RV and IP in this NELT center or somewhere. So
Okay,
is it with the center will be of NELT somewhere or Chi Institute center will be there?
Wherever they have facility, they'll put, because they need computers to be on the network. So they use, normally I normally suggest college labs, but all lockdowns and this and that. So I think they are working in commercial centers now.
Okay.
So NIT and so on.
Okay. We have received the letter from the head officer. We have inspected a sector at Vijayawada. There are 300 systems are there that the commercial center.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
Yes,
No problem.
Yes, you are totally right.
Only thing is your invigilators and all won't know anything. They're all office staff. Office means the center staff. So you please practice everything. I mean, only one observer or someone from the institute side will be appointed. Everything else, you have to be fully prepared. It's like a real exam. I mean, serious exam.
Sir, some question banks or something can be shared in this WhatsApp group.
Yeah, that's what they've already posted, this institute's question bank. I think that should be more than enough. If you really do it, but you have to do it 2 or 3 times. See, the mind will take some time to absorb. So the first time it may be very slow. Second, third time answers will come fast, which means you're subconsciously memorizing it. Subconsciously, don't make it a conscious memory. Then your mind will get stressed out. Subconsciously you memorize it. That's good enough. See, passing our Indian exams is very easy, right? From CAT to CSAT, we get the best results for CISA, CIA, DISA, whatever. So don't worry, you will pass. The worry is after you pass, you have to update yourself.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, my background is a wallpaper actually. So because most of the time use a wallpaper.
Sir, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. And
Yeah.
any doubts, questions, you can either send your coordinator or you can mail me.
You
No
are
problem
speaking
at all.
continuously. You needs a lot of energy, sir. Very
No,
energetic. Sir. You are fantastic energy, sir. God bless you, sir.
got used to it for many years.
Okay, sir. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Over to Chinta Raghunandan, please. Vote of thanks.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for the wonderful seminar today. And we got to know all our doubts and wonderful session on the VPN server security and how the encryption and all. Thank you so much. Tomorrow we are going to meet in the final session. Vittal Raj sir is a speaker. And members, we have already shared in the group 4 recorded sessions in YouTube. We will also share.
No, Gopal Krishna Raju, sir.
Tomorrow, Gopal Krishna.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, members. Tomorrow we will meet at again 8:20 or 8:25. Please be in the line. We will start the meeting by 8:30 or 8:25. Depends on the speaker and other people who comes in the meeting. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Hello.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, sir, a small suggestion. If we start by 8:20, then we can have the inaugural sessions and all these things, and we can start the session start by 8:30. No, just introduction of the speaker. All will take
No
the 10
introduction,
minutes.
sir. Why? Because already started the sessions. The old speakers, already 30 branches are involving in this. That's why one chairman is coming late and something like that. We'll be sorry for when he late. No, tomorrow we will start at the dot. Okay, no problem. Thank you.
So thank you very much and wish all the participants all the best for the exams.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.